it's a $250 million investment, just for 50,000 battery a year. So in order to convert 10 million, 20 million cars, it's a massive investment only for the battery, without considering the car, without considering the motors and the inverters. Last thing I want to say, we're not in competition with oil. We're a complement to oil. But when we say 10% of cars electric in 2020, obviously the guy who is today making a gearbox and the guy who is making tailpipe, he's not going to disappear from one day to the other. He's going to just have a lower growth on his product, and he will have time to divert his technology or his know-how to something else. So this is something which is going to be smooth and is going to be complementing the oil industry, not competing against the oil industry.
Well, I want to ask David this question, a very jingoistic question. Lazard Bank did a study last April they came out with. They looked at the 10 largest wind, solar, and battery companies in the world by market cap. So 30 companies altogether. How many were American? 5. I believe in the battery, 1. And if I'm not incorrect, it was you. Are we going to get our clock cleaned in the electric car industry? And if so, who's going to clean it?
Well, I hate to tell you, but it depends. We've already gotten our clock cleaned in most of these industries because at the root level, making what we would call a commodity item at the lowest cost basis in the lowest cost countries, lowest places in the world, and those areas have dominated. But frankly, Japan has shown us a way in which they don't have the lowest cost country, and they're very successful in making very technical products and selling around the world, and they innovate. They invested. There was a cooperation between the Japanese government and Japanese industry. There was a clear direction of what they would do in each of the industries in which they've been successful, and the ultimate result of that, with that determination, was success. And we clearly, I think, represent an example of a company that took some American technology and some venture capital money and built a business that's now competing on a global scale in Europe, in China, in the U.S., winning contracts, building product. And
but when you look around the world, and just be really honest here, you say the country that's going to get this first, I can just feel it in my bones, is going to be the United States, China, Europe, Japan, someone else. Be honest now.
The Koreans are demonstrating tremendous success, and if you look at the market share gains in each of the target markets you talked about in the last 5 to 7 years, they've made significant inroads. The technological investment in this space has shown us a way to do it. But we to answer your question, we can do this. I mean, this is something that we have the ingenuity, the spirit here, and we have enough innovation. What we need to do is capture that and use that to our advantage to building factories. The government and the Recovery Act has sponsored activity that we are taking advantage of in the state of Michigan, putting money in to build factories in the U.S. Those factories could not be competitive without that money, flat out. We're building factories in China and Korea right now. We've been building them. We're taking them and swinging it around saying we're building them in the U.S. Why? The government stepped up in a way and said, let's cooperate and figure out a way to do this. To the extent that we take advantage of that over the next 5 years, we will build significant factories and employ thousands of people building batteries and battery systems. When that money runs out, the question is, what are we going to do? Is the next battery then going to go back to China, or is it going to go to Korea? That's going to depend on the use of an innovation that occurs over the next 5 to 7 years. And if we do innovate, then we can continue this forward. I believe that's the case.
Anyone else want to jump in on that point? Please.
I wanted to just add to that in that, excuse me, there are two parties that win, and one of them is the country and the consumer. This report talks about exporting $400 billion a year in economic wealth to oil countries. So who wins and how is partly by acting quickly, you create tremendous economic wealth domestically. You enable people to ultimately buy and operate cars that are cheaper and more efficient and better experiences. And so there's a real win for the consumer. The challenge is, as David said, this is a systemic change. And so in order for us to keep the talents that we have, which is the engineers and David's company is built off of really smart people coming out of MIT, and then he's going to locate in Michigan where you have a tremendous high-quality automotive workforce that knows how to do things on 4 wheels. And it's taking advantages of those inherent assets that we have to leverage the government to accelerate action and to catch up. There's a large consulting company that is working with 3 major metropolitan areas in the world, one here in the U.S., one in Europe, and one in China. The pathway to success in one of those countries, as you've written before, is very different. They just have to decide. So the goal with this report is to lay out the levers that need to be pulled by the government to bring together this system and this diverse group of people to act together to make the change happen quickly. And I think that's the way we stay ahead and can win.
Fred, let me put you on the spot for a second and ask not a FedEx question, but a kind of business roundtable question. If I had a beef with American business today, I would say it's really been AWOL. AWOL on these kind of big national innovation questions. I see a lot of business people coming to Washington to lobby for subsection 4, paragraph D that affects their repatriation of income from Suriname. Some very specific thing. But I'm missing the voice of the business community on the big issues: free trade, protectionism, innovation, and this issue. Now, is that because of the whole sort of blowback from kind of the Goldman Sachs Wall Street effect, or where are the big voices of business?
Well, I think there's some voices out there that are speaking pretty clearly. I'm not sure they're heard as much as perhaps they used to be. Pete Peterson, former Commerce Secretary, and I guess the founder of Blackstone, is it? He's been not only speaking, but he's ponied up with a significant amount of money to fund the Peterson Institute, talking about the unsustainability of our entitlements. I think you saw an example of it in the Energy Security Leadership Council, which was the predecessor of this organization. You had a number of CEOs, Royal Caribbean, Southwest Airlines, UPS, FedEx, and we stood up and said that this is a problem that needs to be fixed. We had the honor and the pleasure to work with Senator Dorgan, who showed great leadership, and along with others, and the Energy Act of 2007 and others. So maybe it's just not getting quite as much publicity as it used to be, but I could go on. I think there are a lot of people out there. I think this group here, there are many people operating on the principle of enlightened self-interest. That's a good thing. And what the Constitution guarantees is that you have that right to petition the government. But on a broader issue, I would also say that the people around this table believe, as Carlos mentioned, that many of the trends we have are simply unsustainable. The people in the industrialized world can't say, I'm aboard, pull up the ladder. I mean, people in India and China and Brazil, they want the kind of life that we've enjoyed, so we have to innovate and find solutions to do that. So to some degree, business is not as vocal as it used to be. It's somewhat dangerous to stick your head up, you get shot at if you do sometimes. But I think there's more of it than perhaps business is getting credit for.
Let's open the floor for, did you want to say something? Go ahead.
I think that business is doing more than we think or that we see, but you have to recognize that business has gone global. And so when you think about what is business doing, you look at it from this perspective of the United States, and it may not be the place that you want to spend your time, depending on how you're being received. And I can just tell you from our perspective at Johnson Controls, the business culture and the reception that we receive in other parts of the world that are looking for technology, that are looking for innovation, that have growth markets, is much different. So I think it's a perspective of business that's changed, and so we need to have a climate that really wants that innovation. So I think there's innovation in business. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that we get the benefit of it here in the United States.
Yeah.
Can I just make a point again, because I think that the Economic Recovery Act proposed by the President has, I think, the largest sum of money that's ever been invested in a wide range of these issues that provide the seedbed for this change. So that's important. It's also important, I think, to understand there are many different pieces of this. You can't do what we're talking about doing here without having an interstate highway of